What's going on, guys? Today I am reviewing the cheapest 3x3 1-inch squat rack power cage. This is called the Fagus, not sure how to pronounce it, kind of weird, not even going to touch that. I saw this and covered this maybe a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the cheapest build you can do on Amazon if I was starting over again. And the reason I gravitated towards this, and the reason I really wanted to try this out, which by the way, I did pay for this out of my own money, was not sent to me free for review. However, I will link it down below along with everything else seen in this video. There's some other add-on attachments or additional stuff that I will talk about. So check that out if you guys help support me in the channel. I'll also put together actually an Amazon budget build if you guys are curious about that. But with that out of the way, some of you guys already know this. The reason I'm driving home the 3x3 1-inch holes is because it opens up so many doors. Yes, you could do a lot of other budget racks, and they do have 3x3 racks, but there's a lot more expensive. The great thing is if you want to start out small or save some money, and maybe you don't even necessarily need the 11 gauge steel, this is 13 gauge steel. The great thing is you're not really sacrificing and missing out on a whole lot. In fact, even though upstairs I have a Force USA X15, which is a lot more expensive, it is a 3x3 rack with 1-inch holes. I do not have, lateral holes off to the side. There were a couple other brands or companies that I could find that were 3x3 racks that were budget friendly, but they either did not have holes in the side or they were a different dimension. And speaking of dimensions, I will flash them here on this screen because before I hit order, my goal is actually to put this together in my garage. I'm obviously not in my garage. This just happened to work out perfectly in this very tight quartered room, which I've shown previously in other videos. I had a Speediance Gym Monster 2, I had a pull-up bar, a dip station here that I took down, and I had one stall mat, oriented it lengthwise, and realized this thing would actually work out perfectly. Although in fact, I did actually measure this beforehand, and I don't know if my measurements were off. I didn't think they were, but even with the stall mat, or without the stall mat, this thing was not supposed to fit based on the dimensions of this ceiling. So I'm not sure, maybe I just did something wrong, but before I unboxed it, which by the way came perfectly, everything was wrapped perfectly. Took the longest part of this whole install process was honestly just taking the plastic and tape off. Came in 2 boxes, came really quick from Amazon. No issues at all as far as dings or bends or anything like that. And the metal assembly was very basic. It comes with just a big bag of these types of screws. The only difference was I think there was 2 big bolts up top for the pull-up bar. Otherwise, all these screws, for better or for worse, were just all the same dimensions. So it did not take that long to assemble. Very basic stuff. Did give you some other attachments, so give you a landmine attachment. I left that upstairs in the garage. I did not assemble that, but very basic, it'll work fine. Gives you some pins for banded squats. You also have a T-bar row attached, which also is upstairs in the garage. Didn't bring that down. Gives you a couple hooks and storage site options. Also, I think an attachment for the rope thing, which I didn't do that as well. But once I put this thing together, for sure, this is a tight space, and I was bonking my head on things, but I was actually very pleasantly surprised, and you can't tell, I'm actually pretty excited. I think this is actually pretty cool with what I can do down here. In fact, like I said, with my more expensive stuff, even in the garage upstairs, there's more I can actually do down here. So I broke out some old lever arms that were also budget friendly lever arms, which actually is heavier duty steel, I think, than these. And you'll see some other stuff featured here in a second. Point is though, if you guys are on a budget, or maybe you're kind of testing the waters with picking up a home gym, I think this actually works out perfectly. You cannot beat this price, especially when you're considering free shipping. That was the other thing. I didn't really see anybody talking about this. There's only a few reviews on Amazon, all of which seem to be very positive. So at least there's nothing like popping up at me that has any red flags, especially so far. Although if anything does, you guys know I will pin a comment down below in the future if anything does happen with this. So I don't know if it comes across on the camera, but this is a very tight quarters I am working with, but still I'd say doable. You can't see too much that way, but my work desk is over here. These lever arms actually do get out of the way pretty good. I could still put the bench over here and still do some bench work. Now, when it comes to the weight of this thing, that is something to kind of pay attention to, is that this thing is very light. So it's 13 gauge steel, which I saw some other ones that are a little bit more expensive, 3x3 racks I alluded to in the beginning of the video, that were, I think, 14 gauge steel. Now 13, I personally think this thing is fine. There's a weight rating, which I'll flash on the screen here so you guys can see this. But when you do take this thing out of the box, it is very apparent, like, yeah, this is definitely not heavy duty steel. It is incredibly light. And so with it being light, if you give it like the rattle shake test, it's gonna rattle, I think, compared to any other rack of this dimension. It just is not gonna feel obviously as solid. Later on, I realized I could put my adjustable dumbbells in this little nook, because like I said, this actually worked out excellent to how this little setup is. But I put the weight in the back. But if you do not have this in, yeah, this thing can tip if you really wanted it to. On this side, especially the lever arms being further extended, if I put a lot of weight on these lever arms, I could actually tip this thing over if there's not enough kind of counterweight. So right now I got 4 plates on this side and each side here. Great thing is though, the ceilings are so low that if it did tip, I'm not saying I'm going to encourage this, that the ceiling is going to kind of catch the rack. So aside from these lever arms do work out fine here, I'm just throwing these other attachments to give you guys these ideas. I covered this SYL Smith machine trolley thing attachment earlier. Again, great option instead of spending a ton of money on these Smith machine articulations. Maybe you don't want to commit to a Smith machine. Something like this is great, but even the pulley option can work out here. There's all sorts of ways you can rig a pulley, not just with this unit, but something else. So if you're working at limited space, this is another reason a 3x3 1-inch rack's going to come in handy. Pull-up bar obviously is nothing to really write home about, just a couple different angles. I do appreciate there are some options, so you can do all your basic grips from here and then some other grips there as well. Of all the different pieces to this squat rack, I think the J-cups feel the most substantial. There is some, plastic lining in here to protect the bar. Again, nothing super crazy, but just comparing it to other J-cups from cheaper brands that I've tried, this definitely feels like one of the heaviest. And then back on the point of just being kind of light, I mean, yeah, if you shake it side to side, there's going to be some rattle, but I think they're going to have that rattle regardless, even on solid racks, it's going to move. I didn't say it's the start, but this thing's ideally, has a kind of a safety precaution. They encourage you guys to, this is a bolt down rack. Many people don't bolt down the racks. Of course, that's at your own risk. There are some kind of cheap band pegs you can put down below that I haven't tried that yet, but I'm sure these will work out totally fine. The only thing that I would definitely make sure with something like this is I would not only counter the weight here, I'd also have counterweight on this side if I'm gonna go heavy with band pegs, which I will take advantage of that for sure in the future. Again, for the price, I do appreciate they give you this safety strap. This is definitely heavy woven. I think it said it holds up to 800 pounds. How you put this thing in isn't the craziest thing in the world. It's actually just a screw that goes through the side here, right through the loop, and this is the same standard screw that's used to bolt the whole thing together there. I did notice if I had it too tight though, and I popped this pin out, it wasn't going to move. So I kind of loosened this up a little bit. So that's something I got to be kind of mindful of, is you don't want to be too loose. Obviously, the screw will just kind of pop out, but you're just kind of holding it together with one little push pin here. And they gave you one of these deals, which I believe are for looping in a battling rope. If you're not using that, I probably will not attach this, but otherwise you could hang anything from here, like accessories, resistance bands, whatever. Really love this space. This worked out just so perfect. Granted, I could use a little room out there, but loved how these Snow dumbbells fit in this little crevice. You can see the etched numbers on the side of the rack. Goes up to roughly about 25, although you can keep going up here. This is actually that cheap cat bar that I talked about and did a brief review earlier. I just threw that down here. And there is a little holder here for your barbell. I will probably take that off. You're supposed to go up a couple more notches, but my barbell, just because the ceilings are so low, would hit the ceiling there. So since I got the trolley, I probably actually would take this off and put this back out in my garage. But for the time being, I might end up just taking this off, or you can leave it here again. Other accessory holder, bands, etc. I really could not find any issues or dings or even chips in the paint or anything. This paint job is pretty good. As I say that, there's maybe something minor right there, but that's going to be there. I would anticipate over time just dinging, wear and tear is for sure going to happen, but I've definitely seen worse paint jobs. This seems to be pretty decent, or at least okay. It's going to hold up. For sure with something like this and the quality that you're looking at, like with these holes or anything, I'm just thinking about excessive kind of wear and tear, dropping weights. I would not drop weights on something like this. Even these weight horns, I think over time could possibly warp if you had something stacked like this. I would definitely recommend some sort of thinner plate. I have a deep dish one here, but that is something, if you got a cheap weight horn, that might gradually kind of flex a little bit. And then still a work in progress, but I thought I'd show you this configuration because I do think this works out pretty good with this rack, whether you buy this one or not. So I was able again to put the dumbbells back here, but the big thing is putting those weight horns in a certain position where you're not going to hit the weights either during squatting or benching. And this worked out perfect, at least for me, my setup with my bench and my spotter arms. But this clears out of the way, so if I am benching here, you guys will see some shots of it. I'm allowed to not actually clang and hit those weights. This is also different because of the dimensions of this rack compared to other racks on the market. And on the outside, I can still leave, if I want to, the trolley arm setup, and of course the lever arms over here, and then reconfiguring this on the side so I can still do some press downs. I can even anchor stuff here to do lat pull downs if I really wanted to. So that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, or at least got some ideas. If you want to check out this or anything else found in this video, check the description box down below. Great help support me and the channel.